Purdue fans. This is Johnny DeCamp bringing you play-by-play the rousing...
Everybody, along with Ron Kramer, this is Pete Van Wieren welcoming you to Ross-Ade Stadium.
Live from Ross-Ade Stadium in West Lafayette, Indiana.
It's a football Saturday in West Lafayette, Indiana, and one of the biggest home games in decades.
Boilermakers rush the field. What a night at West Lafayette.
Your Central Indiana Ford dealers are a proud sponsor of Purdue football and the Ross-Ade's Greatest Games podcast. Visit your local Central Indiana Ford dealer today. Welcome back to the Ross-Ade's Greatest Games podcast. I'm Corey Palm. He's Tim Newton, and we are happy to be bringing you this series of the greatest games played in Ross-Ade Stadium after 100 years of its being in existence. Happy that your local Central Indiana Ford dealers allow us to do this. Thank you for their support throughout the years. And Tim, today we're going to be talking about one of the all-time great individual performances that also led to a pretty iconic Purdue victory.
Yeah, we've talked in the past about great games, and certainly there were great players, but I'm not sure there's ever been a person that had a better individual game than Rod Woodson's bucket game in 1986. What he did both offensively and defensively was phenomenal.
Absolutely. 17-15 final. The Boilermakers beat the Hoosiers. And it was the end of, we'll start with the season setup. It was the end of a bad year for Purdue. The Boilermakers finished 3-8. Leon Burtnett had been relieved of his duties or notified that he would be relieved of his duties at the end of the season about a month earlier. So he knew he was coaching his final game. Things just, it kind of hit a high watermark in 1984 and then never quite got back to that. It's unfortunate that it kind of marred one of the great individual seasons we've ever seen from maybe the best Boilermaker ever. He's certainly in the discussion. Rod Woodson senior campaign with Purdue, champion track runner, future NFL, Pro Football Hall of Famer, but that year he was as good as it gets on the field.
Oh, no question. And this goes back to his days at Fort Wayne Snyder when he was a great two-way player. And I remember one year Fort Wayne Snyder played Lafayette Jeff in the playoffs. This is when Lafayette Jeff had Doug Downing, who was also a future Boilermaker. And the stadium was packed, and Rod Woodson stole the show. He took a kickoff back for a touchdown that night, I believe. And they wound up beating Lafayette Jeff on their field. And I think people understood, even though Doug Downing was the local hero and the local kid and wound up having a pretty good career, Rod Woodson really stole the show. And I think he showed that he was the guy that was going to be the big star of that class.
No doubt. No doubt. He Boilermaker fans got on board with him real fast, and it paid off. He lived up to the hype. Him coming to West Lafayette was a big deal. And it lived up to everything that everyone hoped it would be. This final game of his career, let's go ahead and get into the game. Actually, the coolest story, the second coolest story. He played both ways. That's the coolest story. But the team got a surprise pregame. They went out in their home black jerseys and did warm-ups, and then came back to the locker room for their final pregame pep talk. And they found in front of every jersey a gold home jersey that they were going to switch into for the game. It had a bucket decal on one of the sleeves, and very cool. It was something that the coaching staff did for the team, knowing let's give them a little more juice before what's our final game together.
Yeah, Leon was going to go out with a bang, so he figured he'd have a new set of uniforms for his last game. And we've seen Notre Dame do that throughout the years, sometimes with their green jerseys, and in this case, Purdue did it with the golds, and we've never seen that shade of gold before either. Right now we have the old gold or whatever. Who knows what it is? It seems to vary from place to place. This was a real dark gold, and very, very distinctive uniforms that day.
And it was, according to legend, they were paid for, privately. So after the game, each player got to keep their jersey. And I know a lot of those players to this day still have those jerseys. That's how special they are to them. We'll ask Rod about that when we get a chance to speak with him. Okay, the game itself, like I said, 17-15 was the final. It wasn't a thrill. It was a close game. It had a thrilling ending. But couple touchdowns for the Boilermakers, including one by Calvin Williams, who went on to a nice NFL career and has returned to his alma mater in an administrative role. but the story of the day was Rod going both ways.
Yeah, Rod had always wanted to insist to the coaches that he could play in both ways, and that they waited until his last game and said, "Okay, let's see what you got." And I think what he got was pretty good. Ran the ball for almost 100 yards, caught the ball. He had double figures in tackles, and just was everywhere, literally everywhere on the field that day.
Yeah, he did everything but score a touchdown, and that almost happened in that thrilling inning. Yeah, he ended up with 160 yards total offense, like you said, 10 tackles and a forced fumble. It still came down to the end, as these bucket games often do.
Yeah.
Purdue clinging to a 17-15 lead, and the great Pete Stoyanovich comes out to try and boot the game winner for the Hoosiers, and he got turned away.
Yes, Scott Schultz blocked the field goal attempt to save the day, and Leon went out a winner on that last day, and it really would have been a shame had Rod not gotten the bucket as a result of the great performance that he had, and it put a little bit of salve on what had been a very disappointing 1986 season, an 86 season that I think Boilermaker fans had high hopes coming in to at least get back to a bowl. They'd been to a bowl in 84, did not go in 85, had some heartbreaking losses in 85, but then 86, the wheels started to come off a little bit, and they decided to make the coaching change near the end of the season. So at least a good way to go off into the offseason. Unfortunately for Purdue fans, it led to the Fred Akers era, so it wasn't necessarily going to be the best of times coming up for Purdue fans.
Yeah, there were some dark days ahead for sure, but it lasted about a decade until Joe Tiller, who was a part of that Leon Burtnett staff, was able to return to West Lafayette and really bring Purdue back, all the way back.
But I think, Corey, if you look at the Old Oaken Bucket and the games and certainly the performances, this one will stand out. I think of Mike Allstott's performance in 95 down in Bloomington when he almost broke Otis Armstrong's record. And, we can think of some others. Purdue certainly had some huge wins in the Joe Tiller era. Jeff Brom had 2 big wins over Indiana back-to-back in 17 and 18, both of which put Purdue into bowls. Back in the 60s, they had great rivalries. Purdue went to the Rose Bowl one year. Indiana went to the Rose Bowl the following year. They had outstanding football teams. But the Rod Woodson game in 86, you'd be hard-pressed to find anybody that had a single better game on either side than Rod Woodson did.
It was absolute legend. I think he became, he became whatever's above legend that day. He became just an all-time great. And we've blabbered enough. We've seen some highlights. We've seen the gold jerseys. Let's talk to the man after the break.
Your Central Indiana Ford dealers are a proud sponsor of Purdue football. Visit your local Central Indiana Ford dealer today.
Joined now by Purdue legend, all-time great, Rod Woodson. I'm sure you get introduced as Pro Football Hall of Famer most often, I would think, but you'll always be a Boilermaker around these parts.
Yeah, I get introduced as a lot of things. Never Hall of Famer or all-time great at my home, so it's good to hear. But no, it's good to be back. It's always good to come back to Indiana. Feels like home.
Yeah. Well, it was for a long time.
Yeah, it is. I mean, most of my family's still up in Fort Wayne.
Okay.
My wife's family lives in Frankfort, Lebanon area. Okay. So got to visit them right before I came over here. So it's been fun.
That's great. We'll talk about life away from football, but we'll start by talking about Senior Day 1986 and that game it became a legend. Really, like you were an all-time great player before that day, but to play the full game both ways, offense and defense, to put on the performance that you put on, and like you said before we started taping, beat IU for the 4th time. Just when you think back on that day, what do you remember?
Oh, having fun. I begged for 4 years to Leon Burtnett to play both ways, and he didn't allow it for the first couple years. And I got a little receiving opportunities my junior year, my senior year. I think he kind of knew he wasn't coming back, so he let me play a little offense, defense, move the corner a little bit. And then that last game, he came up to me right before the game, probably the week before, and it's like, hey, do you want to play both ways? Like, play both ways? I'm like, yeah, I've been asking you for 4 years to play both ways. And I got to do it, and it was fun, enjoyed it. It just reminded me of old school, high school football playing both ways. And we got to beat IU for 4 years in a row.
Yeah. You've had a heck of a day statistically. 15 carries, 95 yards, another 67 through the air. 10 tackles, a pass breakup. I mean, you were kind of doing it on the defensive side like you normally did, but to get those 18 touches and 150 yards, like it had to like reassure you that, hey, I've been right for 4 years. They should have listened.
Well, I mean, I wasn't trying to prove them right or wrong, but I was having fun.
Yeah.
Fun with my guys. It was going to be, my last college game. Got to do it in a way that I imagined I wanted to do it for the first 3, and enjoyed it. And then beating IU for 4 years in a row, that's what I came here for.
Mm-hmm.
I came here to beat IU. So got to do that. But, playing with the guys that I got to play with, having those opportunities to touch the football like I did in high school,
Mm-hmm.
offensively, just kind of had some flashbacks, but they were fun flashbacks.
There's a pretty iconic photo around the department. It's up in the press box in Ross-Ade. I'm sure you've seen it. It's kind of a moment of peace. You're resting on a knee on the field. I assume getting ready for a kickoff return, but wearing that gold jersey and the stadium around you. Do you remember the photo at all? You know what I'm talking about?
I know the photo. I don't remember the
Okay.
moment, but I would normally. Sometimes I would take a knee. Sometimes I would pray before the kickoff to make sure everything goes correctly for us, but and being healthy. So I don't exactly remember the moment of the kick or what quarter it was in, but I do remember taking a knee in that gold jersey.
Gotcha. Speaking of the gold jerseys, that was kind of a cool side story that day. You guys, that was a surprise, right? You found out right before kickoff.
We kind of went nuts in the locker room when we walked in and those gold jerseys were laying over top of our seats, and getting something new for players back in the day, is that was a surprise,
Yeah.
right? Nowadays they get one almost every other week, but it was fun to see, and I remember after the game taking that jersey home. I still got the jersey sitting in my closet. Still got the blood stain.
Okay.
From the constant all the plays that I've had, a little blood stain on the left shoulder pad. So I kept it clean, didn't wash it. I kept it the way it was. It probably stinks a little bit, but it's in a box.
That's awesome, and that's one of the cool parts of that story is that because they were purchased specifically for you guys, you got to keep them afterwards, and just man, they're one of one, special memories, I would think, for every guy on that team.
Oh, absolutely. When you get to do something different back then, it was rare that you change uniforms. I mean, most athletes are creatures of habit, so they like to see the same thing, doing the same thing, wearing the same uniform, wearing the same clothes under your uniform. So seeing something new like that was surprising, was fun. I think it was it rejuvenated, us saying, hey, let's finish this thing off.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You talk a little bit about Coach Burtnett. That was his last game. He had resigned a few weeks earlier, or announced his pending resignation, but he had a good run here. He was your head coach your 4 years, and you had the Peach Bowl in '84, some good teams, some really close misses, and what do you remember about him as a head coach?
Oh man, country's all get out. Loved him for it. He was real. And that's what you want as a player. You want a coach that's honest, that shoots from the hip, that doesn't tell you half truths but tell you the whole truth. Mm-hmm. And that's what I really loved about him. That he was, when he told you something, he meant it, and he wasn't pulling punches. Sometimes you didn't like what you were hearing, and that was okay. But that's what a father figure has to do with so many different adolescents that he had running around on the field. But yeah, I just enjoyed him. I enjoyed his honesty, but just more so his humility and the way he interacted with us, but the way he was always honest with us as a player. And that's the biggest thing for me as a player. I wanted my coach to talk to me and be honest with me in all aspects, and he was.
Imagine. I'm guessing a lot of the words you just used to describe Coach Burnett also hold true for your coordinator. We all remember Joe Tiller as the offensive guru who brought basketball and grass to West Lafayette, but he was your DC for your entire career too. What was it like playing for him?
Yeah. Joe was fun. Joe was no nonsense, very similar to Leon. The biggest thing, what I really loved about both the guys is that they allow the players to be themselves inside of their system. And I think when you allow that, you find the best version of the player. And, Joe allowed it. They were very similar in that manner, where they were very honest, they were very truthful. They allowed you to be you. And I think for me, and I wasn't a crazy kid. I was just kind of a quiet kid that played football from Fort Wayne. And they allowed me just to live the way I want to live, talk the way I want to talk, walk the way I want to walk. And when I stepped on the field, they allowed me to play the way I want to play.
That's awesome to have that freedom, to have that trust from your coaches. Makes a world of difference. You mentioned kid from Fort Wayne Snyder High School. You came here, of all places. Why did you pick Purdue?
I knew I wanted to play in the Big Ten.
Okay.
So I went to, I visited Purdue, Illinois, Wisconsin, and then I went out to Arizona State for a visit. And Purdue was the one school that said, if you sign with us, you're the starting free safety. And I eventually left. Arizona State was my last official visit. And as soon as I got on the plane, I knew I was going to come to Purdue. Landed, called coach, told him I was going to come to Purdue, got here, and I was not the starting free safety. When I first got here, Randy Feichner was. But in a couple weeks, I got to the spot where I wanted to start. And Randy and I were great friends, have been forever. Then Randy became an offensive side of a guy when he retired from football and became a coach. So everything worked out for the best.
Definitely. You had some real dogs on that defense. You had some teammates that were pretty legit, guys who went on to great NFL careers after having really, really good college careers. That sort of collection of talent, what was it like getting that group together every day in practice?
Well, it's thinking about all the guys that we had. Chris Dishman and I, we came in the same class. Donnie or Rough Cut, we called him. He was already here. So all the guys that were around, Ray Wallace, we called him Big Money, Rodney Carter, he was kind of like probably the most level-headed person on the whole football team. Scott Campbell, when I first got here, was a quarterback, and then Jimmy Everett was the quarterback for 2 years, and then we had Jeff George my last year. So we had a kind of a cradle of really good quarterbacks in that time frame. But all the great players that we had come through here, and so many of those guys played quite a long time in the National Football League. Just for whatever reason, and we always talk about it, for whatever reason, we just couldn't get it put together while we were here at Purdue, even though we had long careers in the National Football League. For some reason or another, we just couldn't get it all together and have those consistent winning years like we had in that second year we went to the Peach Bowl.
Yeah, well, that was a great year. That year started with a great memory that wasn't on campus when you opened up the Hoosier Dome with a great win over Notre Dame. You had a nice game that day against the Irish, and just to be on sort of a national stage like that, to be able to do that in a time where college football wasn't what it's become, where
Right,
you're on TV all the time. To be able to do that in a showcase game like that and upset a top 10 team like the Irish had to be a really special day.
It was. Nobody expected it. Everybody thought we were going to lose. We knew we had our chances. We knew we had a really good football team. And then I always kid with Tim Brown because in the opening kickoff he fumbled it, even though he got it back. But he fumbled it, and then that's like Timmy, like on the biggest stage of your career, when you first got there as a freshman, you fumbled your first touch. so I've messed with him, from here on out. But it was fun. I mean, that whole year, I remember that those big moments in big games, beating Michigan and beating Ohio State. The Wisconsin was the one team we couldn't beat up there. And, we went through the whole year playing really good football and having an opportunity even to being close to get to the Rose Bowl because we were a game out. So we had the players. We knew we had the skill set. We just had to play at our level week in and week out, and we did it that year.
Yeah. To get it all to come together like that, to beat those three, Michigan, Ohio State, and Notre Dame in the same season, to cap it off by beating IU and go to the Peach Bowl. I mean, my goodness, that's a great season worth of memories, no doubt about it. Let's talk a little bit about your time at Purdue away from football. You were also a demon on the track. You were pretty good, a 3-time Big Ten champion hurdler. Why was it important for you to do both sports at Purdue?
Track was my first love.
Yeah.
Track is a team sport, yes, but it has individual lanes for a reason, right? So I get to run against my teammates, and I get to beat my teammates, and I get to run against other people, and I get to beat them. But in the bigger scheme of things, we still added up the points to try to win matches and tournaments and relay races, in high school and here at Purdue. And for me, it was one of those things that, it was a team, but it was individualized for the most part, where football was more team-oriented. I knew I had to work together with the other 10 players on the field for us to be at our best.
Right.
Where in track, yes, we're together, but we're in our individual lanes for a reason. So I get to race you, I get to go against you, I get to give you my best version of myself on that individual lane. So I love that. And I was better at that in high school before I became really good in football.
Okay.
So I thought I was going to be a track runner, and go to college for track then football. And then, I just know when I came to Purdue, I just told them, I have to run indoor track. I always went back to spring ball. We didn't run outdoors. So I always went back out. But to run indoors was always fun. It kept up my track practices and football practices are completely different. So working track and then going back to football, those runs were easy. Because, track workouts, I'm running 200s, 150s, flying curves, flying straights. And then I go to football and I'm running gassers.
Right.
Those gassers are a lot easier after I got done the track practices.
You're looking at your teammates who are struggling and be like, guys, you got to come do this.
Really? You guys need to come to track.
That's awesome. Obviously the training from track helped. They're two very different sports, but speed translates, right?
It does. I just think multiple sports fire so many different muscle groupings, and each sport does that differently, right? So, in high school, I played football, played basketball, which fired completely different muscle groupings, and I ran track. And I came here and I did the same, and I want to keep doing the same. But the only way you can be fast on a consistent basis is to run fast, is to practice fast. And if you're not running fast for time, you can run gassers, but are you running gassers at full speed?
Right.
Are you half speeding it? Or where are you? Only person that can answer that question is the individual player. A clock does not lie. If you're supposed to run it in 10 seconds and you get there in 13, but they know you can run it in 10, then you got to run it again. And that's what I liked about track. It kept you honest, but it kept me at my peak speed. So when I went back to football, I had a little advantage over everybody else.
That's awesome. You graduate from Purdue and 10th overall pick to the Pittsburgh Steelers, first round draft pick, and everything that goes along with that. You come in and just have a heck of an NFL career, with the Steelers, later with the Raiders and the Ravens. And just when you think of your 17 years in the NFL, Mark and I were talking about that. Mark Herman's here today too. We were talking about that. Just the longevity is amazing for a top end defensive player. When you think of your time in the NFL, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
Oh, I was blessed. I'm blessed. Not thinking that I was going to ever play football. It wasn't a dream because, when I was growing up, we only had 3 channels and you saw football on the weekends, not like every day of the week nowadays. I thought I would probably go to the military like my dad did or something. not really thinking I was going to be one of those type of players. And then as I got bigger, stronger, faster, came to Purdue, played decent football, coaches are like, yeah, you're going to get drafted, and not knowing what that really entails, right, and what that's going to be like. But I went to the perfect place for me. I went to Purdue or Pittsburgh, who took me 10th overall. A lot of great veterans were in that locker room, and Donnie Shell and Mike Webster and John Stallworth was still there. Mean Joe Green was our defensive line coach. So I got to, but I got to be around some of that old iconic football that was no nonsense. Chuck Knowles was still the head coach, but I got to learn. And Donnie Shell was my roommate on the away games, so I got to talk to him and learn how to be a professional. And their motto is: "A standard is a standard," and either here to the standard, or you're gone.
Right.
And I was just blessed to be around all those guys and all these great coaches that I learned from. Who Tony Dungy, when I first got there, he was my defensive back coach and defense coordinator. Then Tony leaves, and we get a guy named Rod Rust, who was. I give Tony a lot of credit. I give Dick LeBeau, who came afterwards, a lot of credit. But Rod Rust was the one who changed my mindset of how to be a great player, how to study film, how to be at my best, and showing that, because what Chuck Noll used to say all the time is that football is a simple game. It's just not easy to play at a high level on a consistent basis. And it's so true. I mean, there's a book written in the 1950s about the spread formation. There's a book written in the 1950s about the radar defense, which was like a roaming defense. It's the same thing that's played today.
Right.
And, what we're playing today is more of it's spread, yes. It's a zone read. It's a variation of the wing T in a spread formation.
Yep.
Right, and that's what it was in the 1950s. So the game itself is simple, just not easy to play. And the easier to play 2-to-1 mental to physical, and that's what I learned from Chuck Noll. And then Chuck Noll said it, and then Rod Rust came and said it to me, but not as nice as Chuck Noll said it to me. And he kind of cussed me out and challenged me as a man. But then, long story short, in a couple of weeks, that green light clicked on. And then I went to 7 straight Pro Bowls, then I got injured, but then I went to 4 more after that. So, being there for me was the best place for me to show up at, coming into the league, a place that had standards, that made you live up to the standards. I had to do certain things to make sure you even got on the field as a player. And then once you got there, they held you to that standard. And so I was very blessed to go there and then take that with me once I did leave, and all the knowledge that I gained in that one building from all those great coaches, because you don't get too many great coaches like that.
Right.
You don't get the Chuck Knowles, who won back-to-back Super Bowls twice, the only coach in the NFL history to do that, and Tony Dungy and Rod Rust, and then Dick LeBeau, who was a great coordinator, but he was a great player.
Yeah.
For Detroit Lions. I mean, he was one of those guys back in the day that was balling out with Night Train Lane and Lynn Barney and those guys in the back end over there. But then he developed the blitz zone, the fire zone system, and I got to be a part of that. So being in that system, being in that building for 10 years, there was so much football taught there, and if you didn't learn, you were really dumb not to learn, right? Not to open up your mindset to say, okay, teach me. And I just got to be there. And then once I left, I got to go to the 49ers when Eddie D was there. His last year, and Eddie D is a great human being. And then I got to go to Baltimore, where we won a Super Bowl and got to build that franchise up. And then I got to play for my childhood team, the Raiders. I played for the Powell Raiders when I was 9 years old, and I got to finish with the Raiders when I was 37 years old.
Man, that's great. Bringing it all full circle, right?
It was all full circle. So it's been a blessing. Never thought that would happen. Never thought I was going to play 17 years like that. But my plans are different than what God plans are, and His plans are for me what's going to come to fruition.
I know, family's important to you. You went to college less than 2 hours from where you grew up. To land somewhere like Pittsburgh, where it's only a couple hours from Fort Wayne. Was that good to be able to keep your family in touch rather than going to the coast?
Yeah, Mom and Dad came to all the games, every home game. So being close enough, but not too close, when Mom was in the building all the time, was good. Was healthy. I think it was healthy for my marriage too. So mom's like not always like getting on my wife and them are arguing and whatnot, but it was fun. Being in those situations, going to the Steelers, but being close, like even coming here to Purdue, close enough, but not too close. So they still had to ride hour and 45 minutes to get over here, right? And then going to Pittsburgh, it was close enough, but not too close. And I think it was a fair balance for my personal life, and then my family still got to see me play.
What's keeping you busy these days? I know you're working again for the Ravens.
Calling games for the Ravens. Been doing that for 3 years, which is always fun. Simple game. It's just calling it from the booth and doing it from a defensive perspective. Then because most guys are in the booth are all offensive guys, so it's that offensive perspective. So I get to kind of give that defense perspective. Doing that for 3 years now, and then we started this new company that we're going to roll out in the near future. It's called APS, All Pro Scouting. So it's all ex-NFL players grading high school kids in football. And it's, trying to give them a star system. Right now, the star system is not a true star system. They don't watch film on them. So how can you give a kid a star if you don't watch film on the kid? So we're just trying to change the dynamics of giving kids an opportunity that maybe don't give an opportunity. Because now it's, you got the NIL deals, you got the transfer portals. Coaches are going into transfer portals before they give out scholarships. So we're just trying to, hopefully, somewhere along the line, keep building these kids up in high school, get them to a higher level where they can get a scholarship and get opportunity to play.
Rod, enjoy your weekend.
I appreciate it. Thank you.